Hi, I'm Kathy Davis, Davis Creative Publishing. Welcome to our inspiring author conversations. It's April 10th in St. Louis, Missouri. Today we'll be speaking with Dr. Amy Narishkin on using your authentic voice to reach a broader audience. Each month we welcome guests who inspire authors and share their knowledge, new opportunities, new ideas, and of course their wisdom. Today we're going to welcome Dr. Amy Narishkin. Have you ever felt uncertain about talking with a person who is different? You're not alone. Our presenter today has worked with over 400 leaders in China, India, the United Kingdom, and in the US as an executive coach, helping them to be confident communicators so that they can attract and retain diverse talent. She holds a PhD in adult learning, has over 3 decades experience speaking, teaching, and coaching domestically and internationally. Please help me welcome Dr. Amy. Woohoo! So, Amy, yours path and mine have crossed much longer than I realized. I was looking at Aaron Joy's book the other night that we did in 2020, and I'm looking at the back and I realize there's a quote, an endorsement on here by Dr. Amy. And it's like, well, I came full circle in that moment. It's like I didn't realize that that was another area of our lives where our path crossed. Um,
That and more recently, National Speakers Association.
I was
So
just getting ready to mention that one. Yeah. Yeah, that which is another great community that we often recommend and talk about here in these conversations. But today we want to talk about how do we use our authentic voice to reach a broader audience as we're writing our books. What what keeps people, women, I can say women, we're all women here today, and we got one more getting ready to join us, who from speaking up? We were talking a little bit about this earlier. What's been your experience about what women are taught?
it's an intriguing question because we tend to think that we're the ones stifling our voice. And so we might think it's a character defect, whereas it's actually a cultural default. So what I do is I work with organizations and their leaders who want to be confident communicators so they can attract, retain, and engage diverse talent. And we're part of that diverse talent, right? So what's interesting when we're talking about diversity, whether it's domestic, local, or international, we're talking about cultural intelligence, and that's what I teach. I teach cultural intelligence, and cultural intelligence is simply uh, the ability to accept a person and their uniqueness as they are and adapt your behavior to show genuine respect. And cultural intelligence isn't something you just have, it's actually something kind of like emotional intelligence you have to develop. And there's 5 stages. May I share with you a slide? Would that help?
I would love to see those 5 stages.
All right.
And while you're getting that set up, Jacqueline just joined us, and Jacqueline was in our book Coyotitas, and Latina-owned women business owners and active women in the community. I learned so much, and I saw so many similarities with the message that Latina women hear as young girls growing up, and what actually I grew up in, mid-America, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri, and um, the message was the same. The words were a little different, but the message was the same, as you're prettier when you're quiet, which was Coyotitas, and then mine was don't speak unless spoken to, and sit there and look pretty, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll put some cultural context around what you're talking about, what's happening in our world. It isn't a character defect. This is a cultural default. So cultural intelligence, there's 5 stages, and y'all recognize them. There's See if I can get it going. There's denial, people who just miss differences, and it's not necessarily their fault because they may have grown up in a working class community and never been exposed to differences. So it's not necessarily intentional. The next mindset is polarization. These folks are definitely judgmental of differences. They see them, and it's a simple mindset. Things are either good, bad, right and wrong, black or white, in or out. And then there's the mindset of minimization, where you're downplaying differences. And acceptance and adaptation is where you're moving toward that multicultural or the cultural intelligence. And the way you determine your current mindset, it's not like a personality profile that this is where you are and you're stuck. It's more like what Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you can do better. When you take the assessment and you find out your current mindset, now you know from the place you're working, and now you know what's next. So it's both descriptive and prescriptive. The intercultural development inventory is where I go. It's a different organization for me, but when I move in and work and come alongside an organization, the first thing we do with that leadership team is find out everybody's current mindset, the place they're working from and thinking from and acting from. And IDI provides, for example, Kathy's data and then the composite data of the whole leadership team so they can find out how they're working together. Well, this is actually a bell curve. Two-thirds of the population around the world works from minimization. And it's so rampant. I have to just kind of help people understand because it's our default mode, so we don't recognize it's in play. It focuses on what we have in common, which is like the best of intentions, but it's working for an assumption that somebody's like us. And it dismisses somebody's unique story, their differences, pressures people to assimilate, and makes people feel invisible. It can sound like when a person says, I don't see color, which is a lot like me saying, Kathy, I don't see your womanhood, right? How you identify impacts how you're treated. It can be as easy, as simple as a parent saying to a child who just fell down, get up, you're fine. You don't know if they're fine. Or if your spouse says to you, this too shall pass. Or if you even say to yourself, I just need to get over it. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you need to sit with it and move through it. How does that strike you, Kathy, that minimization that's in play?
Well, I was just thinking back, I was in corporate through 2003 and quite often the only female in a conference room. And I can remember table of 12. And I'm not all that tall. Those of you that know me, uh, my highest height in my entire life was maybe 5'2", and I've reached that stage where it's coming down. Um, but I remember an older mentor type woman in the financial world where I worked whispering me one time, always wear red when you're in those meetings because one, it helps you stand out. And I remember, they would not lower the podium or what do you stand and you give your report and you stand in front of this podium and they would not lower it. And so I would just stand in front of it. And because the podium's as
Brilliant.
tall as I was, so it was,
Brilliant.
yeah, you just had to find ways to allow your voice to be heard. And I didn't realize that. The other thing that made your comments made me think about was as women, and we just happened coincidentally to have a group of women today. It wasn't something we planned, but I love the fact we've got one more getting ready to join us here, my Julie role. And I wonder how often I've caught myself a few times as a leader of a team falling into some of those old habits that of how people used to treat me. And then
Right.
this little light bulb will go off and it's go, wait, no, allow this person to speak. Kind of talk in my
Beautiful.
head is, Kathy, shut up, be quiet for a while, let somebody else speak. Yeah.
That's a perfect example of when you have been othered at some point in your life, you tend to be more aware of minimization that's in play. I just want to point out that they wouldn't lower the podium, so you walked around to stand in front of it.
On the
And
page today or in a bit tomorrow. So I'll send it out.
Whoops. Go ahead. I got that.
so this is what often happens. People from historically marginalized group, whether it's women, people of color, people with disabilities, they're the ones that have to adapt to the dominant culture. And now in society, there's an opportunity for us to mature and realize, wait, we don't always have to have the other adapt. Maybe we can create an environment that makes everybody feel seen and valued, including the men. Not only historically marginalized people, but all of us need to walk away from conversations feeling valued and seen.
And I
And
think that also applies to children.
of course,
Yeah.
yes, and
Yeah.
vets, and our military vets so often feel invisible when they come back because people aren't appreciating all they've been through.
So if you were to define cultural intelligence, can you give us a quick definition of what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the ability to accept a person as they are and adapt your words and actions to show genuine respect. So if I was having Kathy, who's on the short side, a speaker, I might be thinking, how can I make sure that she feels comfortable in this conversation, in this setting? And it's as simple as that, taking into consideration someone's context. May I share with you what happens with women in
Please.
this slide?
Yes.
And then I'll stop sharing. So in America, we have part of our psyche, the American psyche, is equality and fairness are very important to us, more so than other countries. And so as a result, we want to treat everyone the same. And it's so well intended, but it hurts because it's minimizing to people. Well, everybody should just be the same height and be able to stand at the same podium. When all it takes is probably giving you just a little box to stand on if the podium can't be adjusted, right? Uh, so that minimization therefore doesn't recognize that 70% of voices in media are male, and that includes books, gaming, movies. And so what happens is that we're all complicit, parents and teachers. I'm a parent and a teacher, a career-long educator. We interrupt our girls twice as much as our boys. So much so that chatter on a playground is dominated by boys by first grade, even though girls speak first in life.
Wow.
And so that translates into boardrooms, right? And so there's this fundamental bias that women are inherently less worth listening to than men. And the toll on us, self-criticism, self-loathing, self-denial, either in big parts or small parts, that status quo favors male voices, so leaders inadvertently silence dissenting opinions and perspectives, including women's. And we fall for it. But like Maya says, Maya Angelou says, when you know minimization's in play, right? You know better, you can do better.
And when you talk about teams, I meant to ask this earlier, when you were talking about teams, is that defined by number? So can I have a team of 3 or a team of 5 or a team of 50?
With what kind of team are you talking about? Leadership teams in an organization?
Leadership teams that you've spent a 30 years helping. And if I'm a small business owner, um, could I engage you in a conversation if my team's only 3 or 5 people?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The actually a prospective client yesterday. There's four of them running this whole organization nonprofit, and they want to go international. And so typically when organizations reach out to me, one of two things happening. They've got an employee that's they just don't want to lose because they're bringing a lot and they're a great asset, but they're inadvertently alienating somebody or a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
customers, clients, colleagues. The other thing is the leader wants to get in front of it. And this organization, because they're starting to go global, they're recognizing they don't want minimization in play. And so whether it's and a lot of times a leadership team, I worked with a credit union and there were about 12 of them, and a hospital group, there was 23. So yeah. And
You have multiple definitions for for how you define team. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's just a team of one.
Mhm.
Sometimes a leader wants to learn the language and skills so that they can diversify their organization and not screw up. They want to get in front of it, right? So
Well,
that's where the executive coaching for
yeah.
Nadine and I come in.
And quite often as writers, we're a team of one. And how can we incorporate a sense of cultural intelligence in our writing?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Uh, I'm writing this book, and I just spent the weekend because Kathy and Missy and Kim said you got till end of business on Monday to finish with the final copy. So Cyril and I dug in. We
Have
had
deadlines, yes.
Bruce the Basset Hound here, Macy was on my shoulder, Cyril was here, and we were going through all just combing through the book to make sure we were on target. Interestingly enough, one of the reviewers that they were already in this final copy had sent me 10 things that he wanted me to consider. He had done his review with a super critical eye. This is a multilingual gentleman. He's Polish, Piotr, and he's married to a Dutch wife, and they live about 20 minutes down the road from my daughter who lives in Rotterdam. And he actually is an associate professor for Webster University there in Leiden. So obviously multilingual, multicultural, and he's a writer, professor, a diplomat, and an author. So when he says, "Hey, Amy, there's some opportunities here," I sat up. So what's intriguing is cultural intelligence can't happen unless there's two entities involved. Either you're going inside and feeling with you, or you're feeling with another person. And you're practicing that acceptance, allowing yourself or allowing that other piece, and even better, allowing both of you to be just where you are, broken and beautiful, and all your humanity, and adapting to show respect. And since I haven't a goal of an international audience for my book, I wanted to pay attention to Piotr's points. And he had picked up on things that all the American reviewers and even three other reviewers from different countries hadn't picked up on. But there's nothing like educator eyes to see the nuance in language. And, one example was I had used performance improvement plan, a PIP. And that's a very American term. And he wanted that defined. Help me understand. It sounds really cool to provide structure for improvement. Can you elaborate on that? And he pointed out that my whole book is about trust. And you can't be in minimization, Amy, or practicing cultural blindness. I really think that cultural blindness is a word that ought to be in your glossary. So how you become open is by asking for that constructive criticism, whether it's in an oral conversation one-to-one or when you're writing. As you know, Kathy, more people inform and make you culturally intelligent, wiser, kinder, more compassionate. Tell me what you're hearing, how that lands on you, Kathy.
Well, from being involved in this particular project, it's been an eye-opener for me. It's been one of those, just for the audience, where we take a step, get input, and realize perhaps we need to rethink that. Perhaps we need to rethink that. And so I find the irony, just in terms of your big global message that you share with the world of creating cultural intelligence, is what I would call the macro kind of message. And then the micro message is the individual that will be reading your book, and how will they be interpreting it from a micro level.
Right.
And it's there's a mirror there that we've been able to, as the reflection comes back, we go, oh, okay, you're right, we need to adjust that. And so it's been a wonderful learning experience for me to be able to say, okay, this is not quite working, let's fix this, let's see how we can, let's move with the flow, because we are becoming much more of a global community. And
right.
we all saw it happen during the pandemic, and then even though we're post-pandemic, we're still kind of in a world that changes in a heartbeat, that changes in a second. And St. Louis those of you from St. Louis is a very international community. I live in an international community in University City. My grandchildren go to Parkway, which you would think would be very suburbia, but when I attend their music, what do you call them? Not the music, not a recital, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, the events, yeah.
Events, thank you, because they're in band and concert and all that. it's the United Nations out there in front of me. There are children from every country that you imaginable, and it reminds me of how lucky they are to be exposed to that. At the same time, we want to, in my mind, I'm want to make friends. So it's like, how can I better make friends and teach that to my next generation that's coming up, the grandchildren, and how can
Yeah,
we do that in our writing also?
exactly. And the very first step is what you're naming is recognizing that people from different perspectives and backgrounds are going to be reading your work.
Mhm.
And how can I have um, a number of people, a handful of people reading this copy so that it isn't off-putting, so that they want to stay engaged. Piotr sent me these edits, these copy edits, and said, "You understand, I learned a lot from your book, and I'm only giving you these because I want to make it even stronger." And he was very smart. But if he'd only given me the negative, my brain would have shut down. If,
Mhm.
but by saying, "No, Amy, I learned. I am a multicultural guy, and I learned some skills from you. Thank you. And here's an opportunity to make it more inclusive."
Yeah.
This attitude of what you're describing, Kathy, and your organization has been walking alongside me this whole time with this attitude of learner. All of y'all are learners, which is countercultural because in dominant culture in any organization or country in the world, you tend to be the knower. You tend to be the speaker, not the listener and the learner. And it's not that you're not an expert. Y'all are badass publishers, right? And ghost publishers. And yet you share your expertise with this learning attitude. You're growing and learning. And that posture is really appealing to people. It's a way to demonstrate your cultural intelligence. When you come across somebody and you ask them, "No, really, how are you doing?" Not just how are you doing, "I'm fine," but recognizing minimizations in play and going, "No, really, how are you doing?" and pursuing them. "I'd like to know if you're up for talking."
Well,
And
I'm sorry.
no,
No, we're
go ahead.
living in an era where daily we see more and more people stepping up and using their voice.
Yeah.
And so, what are some steps that we can take that when we go to step up and speak up and lift up, that's my part of it also, that we have that confidence or that we know what to say and how to say it so we're not alienating, that we're creating community and adding the unity to it.
So beauty. Yeah, it's so beautiful because we don't want uniformity. We want unity.
Yeah.
We don't want everybody the same. We don't want minimization. We want unity. May I answer your question with a story? Because sometimes a story just illustrates better than any
Be
of us can
perfect. Be
explain.
perfect. Yeah.
So this authentic voice and finding your authentic voice is the question that Jessica was wrestling with in our executive coaching session. And she said to me, "I just don't know how to respond when somebody says you only hired her because she's a woman." So Jessica is the vice president of a mid-size engineering firm in the San Francisco Bay Area. And she is one of 9 owner operators of the organization and the only woman on this executive team. She said to me, "I don't know how to respond when somebody says you hired her because she's a woman." And then she said, "It just drives me ballistic because I interviewed 2 men and 2 women, and she was by far the most qualified."
Mhm.
And I said, "That's got to be tough." And are you bringing this up by any chance because the person sounded accusatory? And she said, "Absolutely. I didn't know whether to defend my position and potentially alienate the guy or drop into silence and basically communicate I agreed." And I said, "That is a conundrum. And there's another way to respond." And she said, "Oh, yeah." And I said, "Yeah, there's actually 3 ways to respond. What you've described, silence, violence, and what's called the third way." And silence, like you've pointed out, you respond with silence, you're masking, you're avoiding, or you're withdrawing from the pain. Violence, you're attacking, trying to control or labeling the person. And in both cases, and violence, just to be clear, can be loud and fast, come in and hot, or it can be quiet and slow over days, months, years. And in both cases, it's undermining and making people feel less than. Well, both those reactions, silence and violence, track back to the oldest part of our brain. So we're well practiced. That's our default. So the thing is, it's a binary operating system and leaves us with only those two choices, silence or violence. The newer part of our brain is where we can move into this contemplative response, the third way. That's where you slow down, you take a breath, and you take a moment, a minute, an hour, a day, whatever you need to get your feet back under you and bump into some compassion for you because you've been hurt. You've been zinged, right? And potentially compassion for them because hurting people hurt. It's in that softer space that you can find the opportunity for connection. And she said to me, "What does that sound like?" And I said, "It sounds a lot like what you've already said." So to be clear, you're bringing this up to me because obviously it's important to you to hire more women. And she said, "Yeah, we need women in the industry. We need more humans." And I said, "And he was right then." "Oh, yeah, he's right in part. And you're right too, because you've done your due diligence." And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Then that's what it sounds like. But just put him first. You're right. It does make me smile. It does make me happy to bring more women into our organization. We need to diversify the organization." And we looked at a number of candidates, both men and women, and this was by far the most qualified woman for the project manager position. And if you want to know anything about her credentials or her background, her story, happy to fill you in. And I said to Jessica, "How does that land on you?" And she said, "I like that. It's like we both win." And I told her that's how you can actually tell if cultural intelligence is in play. You both win. You both walk away feeling valued and seen. So, and just to recap, it's 3 steps. You asked me kind of what you can do. When somebody comes in hot via email or into your office or into your kitchen, wherever somebody's coming in hot, the first step is slow down and take a breath and bump into some more compassion. Step 2 is listening to understand. You already understand your perspective. See if you can understand something about theirs. And step 3 is you're going to go for the win-win. Affirm both of you. Just put them first so that they can hear you. So I'll use my cultural intelligence. How does that land on you?
And I'd love to get comments from our audience participants. If you have a question or a thought or a feeling, raise your hand, unmute yourself. We're a small enough group today that just jump right in here. Nadine, I can see your wheels turning from here. I know you love this topic, as do many other women on this call.
I like the 3 steps a lot because when somebody comes in hot, it's very easy for me to go right into the defensive mode. It's like, I beg your pardon, I'm going to protect myself. You're coming after me. But I'm into neuroscience. So when Amy was talking about parts of the brain, the reality is there is a newer approach about not looking at different parts, but looking at the brain being an orchestra that plays together. But nonetheless, yeah, there is a reaction. However, knowing that you want to just slow down and say, wait a second, let me understand where the other person is coming from. And then to go for the win-win is to maybe say, is to recognize what you're saying is what their viewpoint is. And sometimes it's, help me understand why that's a concern for you. Using coaching terms, it's like, well, help me understand why this is creating such concern for you, so that I'm hearing that person, respecting them, and um, and then being able to respond about, oh, I can see why that's a concern for you. And you're right.
Affirm. Yeah.
And when you said to the woman about, you're right, I'm very happy to bring more women into the organization. However, let me assure you that I did my due diligence.
Yeah.
I looked at the best candidates possible, and while I interviewed 2 men and 2 women, she clearly had the best credentials, and I was selecting the best candidate. And yeah, I was delighted it was a woman that I was bringing in. But
Nadine, you're doing a great job of affirming both,
yeah,
and both are legitimate in the conversation and need to be affirmed. And one of the things that we have to be careful about is saying, but uh, you're right, I want to hire women, but whatever, I did all this, but cancels out everything you've said before it. I love you, but go to your room. You need to clean your room or something. All the brain hears is this second half. And it's a both and. You're right. I am grateful to have more women in the industry, and I did do my due diligence, and I'm happy to give you any information. Nadine brings up a really good point. The brain doesn't work in segments. It is an orchestra, and something that is very much a part of our culture. We tend to live from the neck up in our culture. We honor what's going on in our head, which is why we can think that default mode is legitimate. To practice cultural intelligence, which means you're going to feel for yourself and for the other person to find that affirmation, that mutual understanding, you're going to have to bring your head and your heart and your gut all online together. Cultural intelligence requires your whole being, the whole orchestra, to be in play, which can only happen when you are countercultural and not wrapped up in the urgency up in your head, but you slow down and you take the time you need, damn it, to get your feet under you, which is why the 24-hour rule is so important, because that's how you can bring all these centers of knowing truly online in both y'all's favor. I think Jacqueline had a question about step 3.
Yes, if you could repeat the 3 steps, that would be great.
Yeah, slow down, take a breath. The second one is listen to understand. We tend to listen to be right or listen to speak. We actually want to listen to understand. And the third step is figure out a way to affirm both of you. And take your time. It's something you have to practice at. I'm better at it now, but I've been doing this for a lot of years. And there are times when I have to circle back the next day and go, can I have a do-over? I didn't take very good care of you in that conversation. I've never gotten a no, by the way.
And Jan, you mentioned this book. Is it literally there on your desk?
No, I will admit I returned it to the library, but I recommend it any opportunity that I have. I mean, it literally just jumped off the shelf at me. And the
Radical
gentleman,
Inclusion by David Monina
Senge,
Senge.
the gentleman he was appointed to be the person in charge of establishing inclusion in the school systems in Sierra Leone by the president of Sierra Leone. And the book talks about the journey that he went through to try to accomplish his goals. And it's just so well written. It's very entertaining and it's relatively short, so it makes for a happy read. It's really, really well done. So
It's
it
nice when people,
reminds me, yeah, it reminds me of this conversation that you're in the concepts that you're presenting, Amy. It's very, very related, I think. That one of the
totally related. And what's awesome is he's sharing his journey, and it's work. I don't
oh,
understand why the Lord has called me into cultural intelligence. I'm 59 years old. Why do I have to be doing this now? But it's work.
Uh, yeah, one of his major points, and then I'll give it back to you. But one of his major points, though, was how important it is to include the 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 dissenters in the conversation. How absolutely important it is to
Yeah.
people who don't agree with your point of view, and 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 they have to play a part in the conversation.
So I see Suzanne's hand up, and I really want to get to your question. Can I just piggyback off very briefly what Jan just pointed out? So the five stages of cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence is something you have, it's something you're developing. And it's not like cultural intelligence is the be all and end all. Whatever mindset you're currently in is acceptable. It's legitimate. There are people who are in the mindset of polarization, and they are the problem pointer outers in society. And there are people who are in acceptance and adaptation, who are the problem solvers in society. And we need both. So if you can think of terms of Malcolm X is probably down there in polarization, off-putting language, we don't like it, right? And Martin Luther King is probably up there in acceptance and adaptation. We like that. We like that. We prefer that. But the thing is, we need both. Just consider who got the holiday because of what we prefer. But that's not to say that Malcolm X's work wasn't important in pointing out there, we need women pointing out the injustices, right? I
Yeah.
love that he, thank you. Thank you for recognizing we're all part of this and important.
Well, and I happen to be around a lot of women's voices. We're doing, and we probably have 30 some odd books in process. And this is a chance, as you just said, women are usually the ones that will raise their hand and speak their voice first. In a culture right now where a lot of people are, so I will try and follow Amy's lead here. We've not used the three letters DEI once today. It is a lot of people are looking for it to be on the way out. I think you can stop using that word, but the existence of the concept is still here. And I love the fact that you've created this phrase, and I'm giving you the credit. It perhaps there was someone that you learned it from also, but the concept of um, the willingness to continue to stand up and step up and speak up. Wait, did we just lost Suzanne?
Yeah, she had to go. I hope you can help me email her and
Ah,
get her
we'll make
question.
sure that we connect. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Folks will attempt to throw me in with DE&I. If you haven't noticed my pasty white skin, that's not something I do. And historically, DE&I efforts have been to teach about the other, however, whether it's women or people with disabilities or people of color. Um, and cultural intelligence starts with self-awareness and becoming culturally self-aware, aware of how your own culture impacts you and the way you think and feel and act. And that is what allows you to develop some skills so that you can be more inclusive, to your point, so that you can create a leadership team where everyone feels seen and valued, including the men, including the white men, for goodness sake.
Yeah, and as we translate that into our writings, our characters, whether we're sharing stories of nonfiction on business books or sharing stories, Kim, I don't know how much DEI and cultural intelligence your animals on your heritage breed farm, how they interact. They're pretty welcoming, I would think, of each other. Yeah, the ducks take care of some of the chicken eggs sometimes. So that's right. So wonderful storytellers that we've got on the screen today. But the whole concept of transferring what we're learning into our writings, so that's one way of speaking up. That's one way of allowing our voices to be heard.
You're making me think about a conversation I just had with my daughter, who is a journalist
Huh?
in New York City. And she and I have this conversation. And in this era where there's a lot of chaos and confusion, uh, she does stories around the world and often has to recognize that as a pasty white girl reporting in countries where she is the minority, she wants to communicate trust. And so she and I have unpacked the fact that the faster she just owns her difference and recognizes, so she's learned to say, I'm just a pasty white girl and I have a point of view, a view from just one point. And that means I can not necessarily hear your story. Would you mind telling me your story? So by just quickly acknowledging her difference and help me understand your story because it needs to be told should you want to tell it. And 90% of the time, she's able to capture that story. Sometimes people are like, no, I don't want to represent my race or I don't want to represent my country. And she's like, fine. And then she redirects to a different question. But sometimes people just want to tell their stories. And the thing that she's really been struggling with is because she's talking and working with people of color around the world in Africa and Central and South America and Asia, um, immigrants are being demonized right now. And she said, how can I change that narrative? And we've talked about rather than being loud, just covering this people's stories. Like you're talking about, Kathy, is helping people write books, just covering the people's stories and being that voice that doesn't go away for good and right and inclusion and love and compassion.
I know I have several friends, female friends, who are military or retired military, whose careers have been deleted from websites. And when I found out, I mean, I was in tears. It's just what I have learned since in conversation with them is that each sector of the military has a historian. So the stories are still there, just right now they're invisible. And they're not allowed to put them in. You said something earlier about um, how some people feel discounted and invisible. And at some point, those stories will rise again
They will.
and be more visible. But right, I was pleased to hear that they're not completely gone. But I mean, even Colin Powell was taken down off of a website. And it's just, I don't care which side of the fence you're on. It's just, to me, it's just
Ouch.
unbelievable. So,
I can
as
imagine that stories for you are absolutely
oh
vital
my
and
gosh,
we
yeah.
should not be erased. We should not be
Oh,
erased.
I'm trying not to cry right now. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
But it's so people say, so what are you going to do? I have had people ask me that because we have represented several cultures and minorities and belief systems that may not be mainstream right now. And I said, I am going to keep producing
And
and
that and
we
that
will
just
find
like
a way. Yeah.
that's your work. This is
Yeah.
Abby's work. And in this period of chaos, one of the things that's really helpful for me that I've come to understand is the nature of culture is not one to lift you up. The nature of culture is self-protection and self-aggrandizement. And it's always the mission before the man. That's how culture stays in play, is with minimization, putting you second to the culture. So anytime you speak up, you record somebody's voice, you get your voice into a book. You're being countercultural by asserting yourself and not burying that story. And there's this beautiful possibility for making sure that you share your story and checking with others inside, outside, how it lands. And it's that dance somewhere between you and me is this beautiful, let's say 1 + 1 = 3, this beautiful thing that's being birthed that honors the humanity of both of you.
Yeah, I tell some of our authors that we're currently just in the muddy water. All the mud is starting
Yeah.
to fall to the bottom. If the universe is a jar of muddy water and someone has just shaken it up, we're at the top, but the mud is
Yes.
going to settle. And eventually the mud will settle and we'll have that clarity, that clear
Right.
water. But I can see where we take those 3 points that you talked about, slow down, listen to understand and create that win-win situation. We can create that in our characters. We can use that as an outline for how to share a story in
Yes.
in our writings. And
You're going to notice the third way. It's everywhere. If have you all ever watched Madam Secretary?
I see some heads, yeah.
If you watch, she figures out almost by the end of every episode, she figures out the third way. It's in the Bible. Jesus often took the third way. Do we stone her? Can we stone her, please? Can we stone her? Was the question that they were coming at. The whole mob wanted to stone the woman, right? For being not the guy for being caught in adultery, but the woman, right? And what did he do? He slowed down. He took a breath. He was drawing on the ground. He was doing that. He was listening to understand. And I have a feeling he was praying, right? Listening to understand and slowing down. That's all prayer. That's all contemplation. That's the part of the brain, that's the brain in orchestra so that you can create this win-win. And Jesus didn't say, yeah, you can stone her or not silence or violence. Whoever's without sin, go ahead and cast the first stone. The third way is this beautiful way that blesses everyone involved. And it takes work. You can't always do it. I can't do it. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, you're tired, go get your need met before you try to engage.
Mhm.
I was just going to comment on, I took a diversity training when I was in corporate. And one thing that really struck me is that different cultures have different ways of engagement. And one of them, a lot of people like New Yorkers or people from Eastern Europe or whatever, they have three areas of engagement. One where it's like how a lot of us are on the call, where lily white, maybe Anglo-Saxon, whatever. There are people that are that different culture. And uh, one of the things I realized is they have a third way of interacting that could be bartering and arguing. And in my culture, we have either we're happy or we're mad, happy, mad, happy, mad. And
Yes.
they have an in between where they feel like, oh, well, let's barter to get to the best price, or let's argue to win the thing. And we instantly go from happy to mad, where
Right.
they are like, what are you doing? I'm just trying to barter, or I'm just trying to argue. And I realize that in my own family, that is one of the things I have to realize. I have to go, oh, okay, I have to choose third choice there. I have to barter or maybe argue, but uh,
Nice.
kindly, politely, like you're
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah.
So,
Kathy, you've nailed it. There's a lot more ways to be in the world than what the brain is presenting in a moment of crisis.
right,
And
yeah,
And what you're noticing and naming is our cultural default in the United States is we avoid conflict at all cost, right?
right,
We
right,
we will we're not allowed to talk about race, sex, religion, or politics in dominant white culture because it might upset somebody. But right now we kind of need to be. But
mm-hmm,
how can you do it in a way that's not off-putting is the question. And that's the
right,
fine line that you're walking. But you're right. We
right.
can engage in conversation, debate, and when you avoid conflict, it means you don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, because I don't, yeah, I feel like we're Kathy, where she's close to tears. I don't feel like staying silent. That isn't fair to the immigrants I love, or to people who are suffering right now. And so it is very
Right.
hard, and it's trying to figure out how to do that without screeching.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's like,
Well, certainly, there need to be the yellers and the screechers, and we
yeah,
we we need folks pointing things out. We need
yeah,
people protesting, and absolutely, it's a way. And
yeah,
there also is a third way where you're creating the win-win, but it's going to take a moment to figure it out, and you got to
right.
be willing to do it. It's a skill set you got to develop, and Kathy, you're already articulating it, so you're there.
Yeah, yeah. It's just when I get it, when they come in hot, it is very hard because you don't want to, you don't want to match their anger, and because then they can't hear you. So it's very hard right now. So I think maybe what I get into is just avoiding people who I think are going to say those kinds of things because I don't want to kill them because it's illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. As my friends tell me, Kathy, they don't serve champagne in the what do they call it? The joint,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
In the big house.
exactly.
the big
Yeah,
house. Yeah.
so no,
When
no.
somebody comes in hot to diffuse that situation, you can slow down, listen to
Yeah.
understand, and you can say, it's got to be tough for you.
And I
And
like what Nadine said about help me understand why this is such a concern to you. I like that.
yeah, this is a hot topic for you and
Yeah.
asking questions. And so if you're talking with a person, who's in a position of power, for example, you want to be careful. So white Americans are known for peppering people with questions. So you want to be careful about just jumping into a question. You might ask if there's a power differential, a man talking to a woman, a white person talking to a black person, adult talking to a child, or Kathy talking with a subordinate. There's a power differential there, and that's part of cultural intelligence is acknowledging that. And so if you are the person who's in the position of power, you might just want to say, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" And no, go ahead. No, I don't want to deal with you right now. Okay. That's the beginning of the information, but usually it's no, that's fine. And then what's going on? And they'll tell you about their heartbreak.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's always the line that I try to remember all the time. Everyone you meet has a heartache that you know nothing about. And so I think a lot of times people are coming from their hurt right now. And so they're lashing out and blaming somebody else that isn't to blame. But it's heartbreaking to hear their stories as well.
Yeah.
My best boss used to say to people, help me understand. And I found that that was such a powerful thing
So
to ask, especially to people in power, because it acknowledges your respect for them, their expertise or experience. And there was a researcher whose name I'm going to forget at the moment, who looked at reciprocity. And a natural human inclination is to help others. And the reciprocity then becomes, if I help you, then I feel comfortable going to you to ask for help. And it's just a real powerful connection between two people. But it's such a respectful way to ask somebody, like, help me understand, why is this so important to you?
it's beautiful.
Or why this is such a concern, because it's not accusatory
Yep.
Right.
in any way. It's more the help me understand.
Yep.
And it's just, I think, a powerful way to do that listening you're talking about, that second step, to listen to learn.
So Nadine's bringing up a really great question. And notice how Nadine is saying it with the tone of a learner, not so what's going on with you? That shit doesn't work, especially if you're in a position of power. And it's a tone of curiosity and wonder. It's a tone of respect and genuine learning. I love it.
Yeah.
Somebody's got a comment here? No.
Just part of the conversation. I love where this went kind of organically today. And Dr. Amy, I know you have a gift. We're closing in on the 12:30
Yeah, we are.
time frame here. I want to make sure that you tell us a little bit about that gift, and then we'll make sure everybody gets that link.
Oh, thank you. It's a link to just a couple of questions if you'd love to have if you'd like to have a conversation with me. Sometimes when we have a short conversation like this, people have a set of skills and they're ready to go try them. Other times you've got more questions or you see a need in your organization. Let's just unpack it, and happy to give you that time.
I just added the link to the chat, and that link will also be sent out in your follow-up email that will also have the link to the full recording today. Are there any other last-minute questions that we want to make sure we get answered?
Or an insight, something I would love to hear an insight.
I was just going to say, Amy, this is going to be a hard time for you in this environment, in this culture right now, but you're so needed. So thank you. Keep talking, keep helping, because
Thank
it's
you.
a scary time where we don't quite know what to do to help
Yeah.
others right now. But we got it. It's the biggest time to help that we ever have. And
And I think we're all trying to say the right thing and know what to say.
Yeah. The name of my book, you're bringing it up beautifully, Kathy. Beautiful segue. The name of my book is The Communication Connection, and Kathy helped me really tweak that. The second line is communicate confidently, one conversation at a time. Confidently create a cohesive culture, one conversation at a time. And this is how we're going to make our way through this chaotic time, is one encounter at a time, finding some compassion.
And launch date is, help me remember,
May 14th.
May 14th.
It's like we're giving birth.
Close. We're getting close. Yeah.
Close. You all know it's like giving birth. And I keep thinking the contraction is the baby's coming, but no, then there's another contraction.
We got one more thing to do. One more thing. Just one more thing. Yeah. This week's just one more thing. Yeah. I love that part. So
I'm honored that you all would show up and be with me. And thank you.
And if you have last words of wisdom to share that we can take with us into the day, what would that be?
Ooh. What sits at the foundation of cultural intelligence is you can't genuinely care for someone else unless you first cared for you.
I love that.
We need to love ourselves just as we are, broken and beautiful.
Not feel guilty about that. Yeah.
We just are. It doesn't mean we don't have stuff to learn.
Yeah, part of our own culture. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. We're awesome.
We were taught so well. Yeah, I want to thank everybody for being here. We'll be back on May 8th, Thursday. The name is slipping me, but she is we're going to be talking with a speaker consultant who helps you turn your book into more speaking opportunities. And she was recommended to me by one of our clients out on the East Coast. So we're bringing in some East Coast conversations.
Along with Victoria.
That's right.
Thank you, April.
Thank you all.
Tatiana, thank you.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Kathy.
We'll be in touch. Thanks, guys. Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.